Global National with Robin Gill.
Good evening and thank you for joining us. The family of Tori Stafford is finally feeling their little girl got justice. 3 years ago, the 8-year-old was abducted, raped and murdered. Last night, a jury convicted Michael Rafferty of first-degree murder, which carries an automatic life sentence. The verdict comes after a grueling trial, one that outlined the horrific details of Tori's last hours. Because the case involved a child, it hit home right across the country, but nowhere more than Tori's hometown. Mike Drolet has been covering the trial from the beginning. He joins us from Woodstock. Mike.
Robin, it's been a tough 3 years for the city of Woodstock, Ontario. It may look the same, but ever since Tori Stafford's abduction, there's been a cloud hovering over this city. So now, finally, 3 years after Tori's murder, 10 weeks after the start of Michael Rafferty's trial, the city finally got the verdict they've been hoping for.
There was no holding it in anymore. Jubilation from Tori's father. A quiet moment to hug and cry with Tori's mom.
Not right now. I just want to enjoy this.
This was their moment. The two estranged sides of Tori's family had sat in the courtroom every day, unable to speak their minds for fear of hurting the Crown's case. But they never wavered in their convictions. Rafferty, they always believed, was guilty of murder, sexual assault, and kidnapping.
I just wanted to jump over that glass and go and wrap him right in the lips, but I couldn't do that, so we'll just let it go the way he did. He's got all 3 charges. That's all we wanted. We didn't care about the rest of it.
What we've been feeling inside for the last 3 years has been hell. This has been almost a release for us.
It was 3 years ago, 8-year-old Tori walked out of school into the path of Terry Lynn McClintock. The 18-year-old had been sent by Rafferty to find a young girl. He was waiting in his car nearby. Tori would be dead mere hours later, her half-naked body buried in a garbage bag under a pile of rocks. Police eventually zeroed in on McClintock. After initially denying any involvement, she confessed everything.
I could hear her calling out for me, saying, T, make him stop, T.
A sickly-looking Rafferty was in another interrogation room.
This is the girl you killed, all right? She's not missing anymore. She's dead.
Despite all the evidence presented to him, he never admitted guilt.
I didn't do anything.
Well, that's not entirely true.
That is entirely true. I didn't do anything.
That proved to be the defense's only argument. Rafferty, they said, didn't know what was going on. It was all McClintock. However, they never presented any evidence to support that claim. And despite McClintock changing her story on the stand and key evidence being withheld, it didn't matter. The circumstantial evidence left no room for doubt.
Yes, he said a few things. Mr. Rafferty is obviously disappointed by the verdict.
In Woodstock today, as it has been all along, the focus was not on Rafferty, but on Tori.
I couldn't care less about him now. He's gone. He's history. And he is no longer a concern to any of our citizens here in Woodstock. He's no longer a concern to me as a chief of police or any one of my police officers.
Everywhere you look in town, there's evidence of Tori and her favorite color, purple. So too are people like Julie Jeffrey, who helped search in the days after her disappearance.
Bittersweet, because I feel, justice has been served, but she's still not coming home, and that's sad.
This has been one of the most watched court cases in the country. The eyes of Canada have been on Woodstock, Ontario. So now finally, next week, after the victim impact statements are read, hopefully this small city can slip back into anonymity. Robin?
Mike Drolet in Woodstock, Ontario. Thanks, Mike. And as Mike mentioned, Friday's verdict is the culmination of a case that goes back 3 years. On April 8th, 2009, Tori Stafford is reported missing. Over a month later, police arrest Michael Rafferty and Terry Lynn McClintock. Then on July 21st, police confirm one of their officers has discovered her remains on a hunch. In 2010, McClintock pleads guilty to first-degree murder. Finally, on March 5th, 2012, Rafferty's trial begins. It wraps up nearly 2 months later after a 12-person jury found him guilty on all counts. Joining us now is Jonathan Rosenthal. He's a criminal defense lawyer and professor at Osgoode Law School in Toronto. Jonathan, thanks so much for joining us. Was there anything specific in the evidence that was the clincher for the jury?
I don't think there was one piece of evidence that would have been the clincher. I think it would be the totality of the evidence that they heard from 61 witnesses over a long period of time. It was an overwhelming case, and there was just a huge amount of evidence upon which a jury properly instructed could find Mr. Rafferty guilty of all the charges, which they in fact did.
The judge didn't allow the jury to know about some incriminating evidence, specifically the child porn found on Rafferty's computer. There was some contradictory testimony from Ms. McClintock, who was the star witness. Were there any concerns that the jury wouldn't return a first-degree murder conviction?
I certainly had no concerns whatsoever that he wasn't going to be found guilty of all of the charges for which he was. As I said, it was certainly an overwhelming case. It was a case that was effectively presented by very experienced Crown attorneys. It was certainly, to me, an overwhelming case against Mr. Rafferty on all counts.
So does this verdict restore the public's faith in the justice system?
I don't think the public's faith in the justice system ever should have been affected. Trial judges on a daily basis must exclude evidence when the prejudicial effect of that evidence far outweighs any probative value. Certainly, Mr. Rafferty's rights would have been greatly prejudiced had that pornography been disclosed to the jury, and quite frankly, he would have had a slam-dunk appeal at this stage of the game if he was convicted based on that evidence.
Now, there likely will be an appeal. What could be the basis for that?
I'm not sure there's going to be an appeal. Obviously, the only grounds for appeal would be some sort of error in law. The defense was successful in a great number of pretrial motions. A great deal of evidence, including the child pornography, was excluded. I'm not sure what grounds of appeal he has because, quite frankly, it was an overwhelming case presented against him.
All right, Jonathan Rosenthal, thanks so much for your time.
You're very welcome.
The Tori Stafford case changed the way police respond to child abductions and how they carry out their investigations. Among the changes, a new set of guidelines for issuing Amber Alerts. As Jackson Brosco tells us, some investigators are also calling for a new approach to the use of search warrants.
The most obvious lesson from the kidnapping of Tori Stafford is a change in the way police handle Amber Alerts. At the time Tori went missing, investigators faced criticism for not issuing an alert. Tori's case simply didn't qualify for one.
I'm quite confident saying that in this case, we did not meet the criteria of an Amber Alert.
After a push from the public, Ontario changed the rules. Today, police only need a suspicion that a missing child is in danger to broadcast an alert.
Whenever we have a child abduction, we've got to do everything we can to get it out to the public immediately.
Yet the trial of Michael Rafferty exposed other challenges with the law. While police found evidence of child pornography on Rafferty's computer, the evidence wasn't allowed in court. Police obtained the computer with a warrant, but they didn't have a secondary warrant to search its contents.
Even with that obstacle thrown in front of us, I stand before you with a conviction for first-degree murder, a conviction for abduction, and a conviction for sexual assault causing bodily harm to the sweetest 8-year-old girl that I never met.
Not enough to jeopardize the case, but this retired detective warns increasingly complex search warrants are effectively handcuffing law enforcement.
I find that completely bizarre. The whole purpose of seizing evidence is to examine it. This case will now be referred to as yet another example that defense lawyers can use to have evidence disallowed in terms of being admissible in court. It's very frustrating.
With the case now closed, Woodstock's mayor points to more subtle lessons learned in his community. Parents who diligently wait for their children after school, refusing to let traffic police move them along.
They were now greeted by parents who were more hostile and said, I have a right to be here to pick up my child.
Tough lessons all around, born out of a tragedy no one wants to see repeated. Jackson Prosco, Global News.